morning of September 6, 1939. The sun rises timidly over Poland, cut by columns of smoke rising from ravaged fields and villages, bringing the pungent smell of scorched earth and melted metal. The air is laden with humidity, mixed with the distant stench of decomposing bodies, while the roar of German engines echoes like an incessant growl, making the ground vibrate under the feet of exhausted soldiers. In improvised trenches, Polish fighters feel the weight of fatigue in their aching muscles, cold sweat sticking to their torn uniforms, and the bitter taste of dust in their dry mouths. Civilians, hidden in damp basements or fleeing along muddy roads, hear the crackle of sporadic gunfire and wonder how much time remains before hell engulfs them. The Nazi invasion advances without mercy, and terror infiltrates every breath like an invisible fog that suffocates hope. Near the village of Mrocza, in an open field swept by the wind, horror materializes brutally. 19 Polish officers, after a fierce battle against a German armored unit, raise their hands in surrender. Their uniforms are dirty with mud and blood, faces marked by exhaustion and the dust of intense combats. The air vibrates with the hum of stopped tanks, the smell of diesel and gunpowder still fresh. But instead of imprisonment, comes summary execution. Wehrmacht soldiers, with cold stares under steel helmets, line up the prisoners against an improvised fence. Short orders in German cut the silence, followed by the dry snap of rifles. Bodies fall onto the damp grass, blood spreading like dark rivers, releasing a metallic odor that mixes with the smell of freshly turned earth. There is no mercy, only the echo of shots resounding across the fields, leaving nearby survivors paralyzed by fear, feeling their hearts beat like a war drum in their chests. Not far away, at an isolated train station, the nightmare continues for other Polish prisoners. Captured after surrender, they are pushed into the wooden shack of the station master, a cramped and dark space smelling of oil and old wood. The doors are locked with heavy chains, and panic sets in when the smell of gasoline invades the air. The Germans light the fire, and flames lick the walls quickly, the crackling of wood mixing with desperate screams from inside. The intense heat makes the air ripple, while the prisoners pound on the doors, nails scratching the wood in vain, suffocating smoke filling their lungs and turning each breath into burning agony. All perish in the flames, their charred bodies leaving an acrid stench that lingers in the air for days, a somber reminder that the laws of war, forged in conventions like those of Geneva, are ignored by the Nazis. Captured Polish soldiers now doubt everything, feeling the chill of uncertainty seep into their bones, as if every surrender could be a death sentence. Meanwhile, German troops march into the port city of Gdynia in northern Poland. The streets, once bustling with the salty smell of the Baltic Sea and the noise of cranes in the harbor, now echo with the stomp of heavy boots and the rumble of armored vehicles. Polish civilians, peering through fogged windows, feel the tremor of walls as tanks advance, the air laden with dust raised by the treads. Women clutch children to their chests, hearts racing at the sound of shouted orders, while Nazi soldiers search homes, the click of fixed bayonets echoing like a constant threat. The vital harbor for trade falls under enemy control, and the smell of wet rope and fresh fish is overpowered by the odor of war machine oil. For the residents, the future seems a dark shadow, with the sea wind bringing not relief, but the omen of more suffering. For Polish Jews, the horror takes an even more sinister form. The Nazi conqueror, in previous speeches like the one 7 months earlier in Berlin, promised the annihilation of the Jewish race in Europe if war broke out. Now, 6 days of conflict confirm this. Massacres and humiliations become routine. In occupied villages, Jews are dragged from simple homes, feeling the cold metal of revolvers against their necks, the smell of sweat and fear mixed with the humid air. Families tremble in dark basements, hearing heavy footsteps above, hearts pounding with the terror of being the next victim. The Nazi conqueror sees them as the primary enemy, and each German advance brings summary executions, leaving bodies in the streets, the buzz of flies becoming the sound of inevitable death. In a defiant gesture, Dr. Chaim Weizmann, Zionist leader, sends a letter to British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, declaring that Jews will fight alongside the democracies against Nazism. Published in the Times that day, the message echoes like a cry of resistance, but in occupied Poland, where the smell of smoke from burned villages fills the air, it seems distant. Meanwhile, the Nazi leader, confident, is driven by car from his special train to the battlefield of Tucheler Heide. The air there is dense with the dust of recent combats, the soil marked by artillery craters, and the smell of fresh gunpowder hangs like a mist. Observing the fight, where a body of Polish troops is surrounded, he receives news that German forces have entered Krakow. The city, with over 250,000 inhabitants, falls after just 1 week of war. In Krakow's ancient streets, the echo of German boots replaces the daily bustle. The air laden with tension while civilians feel the weight of occupation, the smell of fresh bread from bakeries now mixed with the odor of collective fear. On the Western Front, France launches a limited offensive in the Saar region, crossing the German border cautiously. French soldiers advance through dense forests, feeling the damp leaves under their feet, the fresh autumn air laden with anticipation. But it is a timid action, without the impetus needed to relieve Poland, leaving the Poles isolated in their agony. At sea, German submarines sink British merchant ships, like the Bosnia and the Royal Sceptre, with explosions echoing in the cold Atlantic waters, the smell of spilled oil mixing with salt, while survivors cling to wreckage, feeling the ice of the water penetrate their skin. The 6th day of the war exposes the raw cruelty of the conflict. Surrenders turning into executions, prisoners burned alive, cities falling one by one. Soldiers on the front line feel exhaustion in their trembling limbs, civilians the dread of an uncertain tomorrow. What does the next day hold? More devouring flames, more blood soaking the earth, or a fleeting breath of resistance? To not miss the next day, subscribe, like, and comment.